A massive flash of light suddenly explodes from the rocks near town, letting everyone know that some insane power was just unleashed. Today was the day Kanado finally found his true power, looking back at how he used to be a total loser while his tiny magic spirits watched him change for good. The memory hits him hard, sweat pouring down his face as he realizes that was the exact moment he stopped being human. Back in the present, he's chilling in a packed adventurers guild, leaning against a pillar and looking totally unbothered while he watches the crowd. Suddenly, a loud blonde guy cuts right in front of him to complain about the wait, and when he gets called out, he acts totally shocked and says he didn't even see Kanado there. The guy drops the act and sneers, asking how a bottom-tier E-rank tamer like Arga dares to boss around a B-rank pro, and you can see Kanado getting seriously heated. He gets right in the tamer's face and tells him to stay in his lane, calling him nothing but a pathetic little shrimp. To show everyone who's in charge, the bully grabs a horned guy named Razzle and yanks him back by his hair. Before he can take another step, a massive hand clamps onto his wrist as the guildmaster, Anson Neowagus, steps in to calmly tell him that skipping the line isn't going. Ansel totally grills Nemera, warning her that she's cruising for a demotion. Then he turns to Kanado, calling him Arguson, and tells him to just report this drama to the staff next time. And even though he sighs, that tiny smirk proves he's letting it slide for now. He forces a fake smile while sweating like crazy, telling them it's totally fine since he's got nothing but time anyway. He heads over to the guild counter where a cheerful receptionist greets him, and when Hinato says he's officially quitting the party, the guildmaster Ansa watches him with a super confused look. Walking away like this brings back some seriously painful memories, and looking at his face, you can tell he totally saw this coming. Flashback 3 hours, and we see this spiky-haired jerk named Nemera sitting all smug with 2 girls, pointing his finger and telling Arga he's banished while Kanado just stares. He's totally lost and asks why he's being kicked out, but the hooded girl next to Nemera just scoffs, saying he's too slow to get it because he's just a tamer. She yells that they have zero use for a tamer who just makes friends with monsters, and when a totally lost Kanado asks what's so bad about that, Nemera jumps in with a smug grin to explain it to him. Nemera starts screaming that tamers level up way too slow because they share XP with their monsters, pointing out that Arga is the only E rank left in the squad. Kanado tries to remind. He begs Nemera to remember their 2 years together, but Nemera just scoffs, telling him that someone who drags the whole team down isn't a real teammate. He drops the ultimate insult, calling them total dead weight, and as Nemera and the girls laugh in his face, Kanado looks completely crushed while Nemera mocks him for having so much free. He snaps back to reality at the guild counter, where the receptionist notices his card hasn't been touched in 2 years and offers to get him registered again. Riley tells the receptionist to update his status, casually mentioning he's got all the time in the world since he just got kicked out, which leaves the poor girl totally flustered. She pulls out a dark crystal ball, but he just glares at it, asking what it is and why she keeps bugging him. She's all smiles as she explains it's a brand new status checker that uses the crystal to read his info directly. Kanato is totally stunned, but the receptionist explains his info zaps straight to his adventure card, and the guildmaster Ansa adds that the old paper system was a mess because everyone used to lie on their forms. The receptionist starts the scan and reads his info right off the crystal. Argo Abilion, 18 years old, human, and he's only a rank E to G. She calls him a tamer, but then out of nowhere, a second job pops up, Fusionist. He points right at the gadget and yells that it's busted, making the receptionist look up from her work totally confused. Ansa steps up looking totally hooked, admitting he's never heard of a Fusionist, but the crystal is definitely right because it's showing skills like Tame, Companion Art, Mix, and Fusion Art. The guildmaster's eyes go wide as he finally gets it, muttering, second job, while Kanado just stands there repeating the words like his brain is totally fried. He explains that while most people only get 1 job, some rare legends actually get 2, leaving Kanado totally stunned when he realizes he's one of those lucky few. He clenches his fists and shouts about how great this is for switching jobs, but the guildmaster shuts him up and tells him this is way more serious than he thinks. His hype instantly turns into total shock as he realizes how insane this is, because getting a second job is a miracle that only happens once every 1,000 years. His shock turns into total hype as he realizes he's a once-in-a-thousand-years genius who just completely flipped his luck around. He starts wondering about his new job and asks what a fusionist actually does. And while the receptionist leans in to hear the answer, the guildmaster just looks totally confused because he's never heard of it either. Since the guildmaster won't talk, he starts guessing out loud that based on the name, it's probably a job for crossbreeding monsters. But then, his hype totally dies when he realizes his big discovery is actually super common, making him feel like a loser for thinking he found a once-in-a-lifetime secret, while he turns back to the guildmaster with sweat dripping down his face, nervously asking if he can actually pull this off while they stand right outside the guild hall. He ditches the guild and heads to an empty field to test his new powers, holding up a mysterious blank card to see what it can do. He grips the card tight with a look of total focus and shouts for his squad to finally show up. The second he calls out, 3 long dark shadows burst from the ground looking like total monsters. The shadows finally harden, but instead of scary monsters, 3 familiar little guys appear. A baby dragon, a wolf pup, and a slime. He looked at his crew with a grin, picking them as the test subjects for his first fusion. And when he summoned a status screen, the slime leaned in to check it out. The screen pops up with their stats, showing the level 10 baby dragon has 3 attack and 1 defense, the level 10 wolf has 2 attack, and the level 1. Even though they're weak, he sticks to the plan and checks his fusion chart, starting by merging a bat with his baby dragon, Lala. He was feeling super hyped because of a really weird talk he just had. The guildmaster, Ansa, was actually shocked and said tamers could only give orders to monsters. But for Kanado, Ansa made it super clear that tamers can't just mix monsters to make new ones, and the confused guild lady asked Kanado why he even thought that was a normal thing to do. She put him right on the spot, and he started sweating bullets while scrambling to find an answer. He finally spilled the truth. He was completely self-taught, never went to a real school, and had never even met another tamer before. The room went totally quiet after his confession, and he was devastated that everyone now knew how lonely he really was. The receptionist felt super bad that he had 0 friends, while Ansa remembered that. He shook off that cringy memory, snapped back into focus, and hyped himself up to finally get this fusion started. He lets out a sigh and finally accepts being a fusionist, thinking mixed fusion art sounds way more hype, right before looking at a prompt to fuse a baby dragon with a bat. He slams that yes button immediately, kicking off the mixed fusion art. The command hits and a massive light explodes around Kanado, dragging the bat and the baby dragon together into a wild swirl of energy. Once the light fades, the new monster is finally revealed, and Kanado sees its wings and colors have totally changed to look like a bat as the little guy lets out a weird growl. He checks the monster's stats and sees its power dropped, but it kept its old skills and gained a sick new ability, the bat's ultrasonic wave. His worry instantly vanishes and he flashes a huge grin, realizing that even with lower stats, this new skill actually makes his monster way more powerful than before. Totally fired up, he holds his modded dragon high and shouts that as the fusionist, he's gonna make this thing way more powerful. His baby wolf and slime buddies are just watching the whole thing go down, and Kanado looks at all 3 of his monsters and tells them they're actually super lucky. He goes from sounding hyped to totally bummed out, explaining that fusion makes them crazy strong, but even though he's called a once-in-a-thousand-years genius, he still feels like he's weak. But he doesn't let that bring him down at all. Instead, he squeezes his fist and makes a silent promise to himself. He's going to get just as strong as they are. He sat there fuming, thinking about those jerk adventurers who laughed at him, sweat dripping down his face as he remembered their smug expressions, and decided he was finally going to show them what he was. He was totally lost in his thoughts until a tiny dragon chilling in the fields outside town suddenly looked up at him. Out of nowhere, a totally wild idea popped into his head. Fusion. He figured that since humans and monsters are basically the same magic-wise, he could probably just fuse them together. It was a crazy thought that was both super scary and totally awesome at the same time. He knew this was a massive gamble. One wrong move and he'd turn into a freakish monster or just straight up die. But the power he'd get was totally worth it. Suddenly, he couldn't resist the chance to grab that monster power for himself, so he smashed the yes button and triggered his mixed fusion art to finally become a total beast. Suddenly, a massive pillar of light exploded from his body, and the shockwave sent his little friends flying backward across the field. Once the light clears, he's standing there gasping for air and soaked in sweat, but he's totally in one piece, and he feels this massive wave of relief knowing he actually made it out alive. He checked himself over and realized he was totally fine, but his celebration stopped dead when a status window popped up, something only monsters are ever supposed to have. Once he realized what this weird situation actually meant, he just froze with his eyes wide open in total shock. He let out a nervous laugh as he stared at the screen, realizing he was officially a demon human now, and that transformation was the only reason his status window finally turned on. He looked down at his hands and realized the truth. His crazy gamble worked. but he wasn't even human anymore. Kanado rips a request off the board in the middle of the busy guild and bolts for the door, totally hyped that there are so many awesome jobs in this area. He slams the paper onto the counter and shouts, "I'm taking this job." The receptionist locks in his mission to hunt goblins up north, but she warns him it's a boring job with barely any pay. He doesn't even care, though, telling her he just wants to test his power, which leaves her looking totally confused. She looks up and finally notices how huge he is, asking if he's always been this tall, which totally catches Argason off guard as he scratches his head. He gives a super mysterious answer about being reborn and says his body changing is just the start, leaving the receptionist staring at him in total confusion. He shuts down the talk with a quick wave and says he's heading out, while the receptionist calls after him and the guildmaster, Ansa, watches him go from the sidelines. The moment he leaves, the receptionist gives Ansa a worried look and says there's definitely something sketchy about Argason. Ansa figures Arga just wanted a fresh start, especially since he claimed he was reborn and was way too hyped to take such a low-paying job. He strokes his beard, wondering why a total pro like Arga is taking a basic goblin quest in the northern plains, and you can tell he's getting seriously worried. She's low-key worried if Argo's gonna be okay, but the scene shifts to the northern plains, which are a total death trap right now, and Kanado is already there in the Yi. He turns to his crew with a cocky smirk and tells them these guys are the perfect targets to test their new fusion powers, and he's going to show off his own strength right after. Looking at his new body, he realizes turning into a demon human is a total game changer since his health and mana just quadrupled, and his attack power shot up from a measly 5 all the way to 81. He's still going through all his new powers, and while merging with a spider monster lets him shoot webs, the one skill that really blows his mind is the last one he got, Evolver. He stares at his hand, realizing this new skill is a total cheat code that doubles his XP and halves the requirement to level up, meaning he's about to get crazy strong way faster than anyone else. He snaps out of it when a goblin in the distance suddenly whips its head around. They've been caught. He points straight ahead and tells his tiny dragon Lala to blast them with a massive ultrasonic wave. That sonic blast rips through the goblins and leaves them totally dazed, making him realize his bat fusion skill is actually insane as he orders everyone to charge. His monsters dive straight into the action, with Lily the slime using a crazy new bite skill from a cobalt fusion while Lily the wolf slams enemies with a charge skill from a boar fusion. He dives into the fight and slices a goblin clean in half, but his face instantly turns into a look of total shock. That sliced-up goblin doesn't even fall down, and instead, both halves stand right back up to let out a terrifying silent scream. He's standing right in the middle of those twitching goblin halves, and his sword is still buzzing from that last easy slash. He's totally stunned by how easy that win was, laughing in disbelief that he just sliced them in half with a basic knife when he used to be so weak. He's totally blown away as a massive wave of level-up screens fills his eyes, and while he's confused how he's growing so fast just from weak goblins, he suddenly realizes he grins as he sees everyone's stats skyrocket, but his own massive power boost is honestly on a whole different level. He checks his stats and his jaw drops when he sees 241 attack and 301 agility, which are basically A rank or even S rank numbers, and he realizes but his big win is cut short by a massive roar that shakes the whole field, making him spin around in total shock. Right in front of him is this massive, terrifying monster. It's a giant furry beast with wings like sharp blades towering over him. Its shadow is so huge that it literally blacks out the entire sky. He's just standing there totally frozen, barely able to squeeze out a single word. Back at the guild, the receptionist looks super stressed as she asks if someone really spotted a sword bear out in the northern plains. Ansa, the guildmaster, strokes his beard and confirms that people have been seeing this monster non-stop lately, and when the receptionist brings up that the sword bear is a tough C, the guild receptionist is totally freaking out because the sword bear has fur-like blades and razor-sharp claws that make it a deadly A-rank monster, which is way too much for a low-level E-rank adventurer like Arga to handle. Kanado stares down the beast and realizes his new demon form maxed out his taming skills, but he decides staying alive is way more important, and tells his crew to stay back. His face turns stone cold as he swears to take this thing down. And as the sword bear lets out a massive roar, Kanado charges straight in with his knife ready. He lunges at the monster, hyped for that massive A-rank XP boost to level up instantly, but his blade hits its arm and does nothing because its skin is way too tough. The beast just roars like it's nothing, and Kanado realizes his knife is trash while punching that sharp fur would be straight up suicide. He can't even react to how fast this thing is as a giant clawed arm comes swinging down at him. He barely dodges the attack and is so hyped he has his spider powers, shooting a web to swing away and get some distance from the beast. He sticks the landing and locks in, instantly cooking up a brand new plan to switch things up. He pulls out the spider silk again and starts wrapping those super strong thin threads right around his hands. He wraps the silk tight around his hands to make some DIY gauntlets, flashing a cocky smirk as he gets ready for his next move. He yells the name of his new weapon, Spider Silk Gloves, and squares up to take on that giant monster one more time. He charges forward with his silk-wrapped fist pulled back, screaming that he's not scared of that fur armor anymore as he slams a massive punch right into the monster's chest. The hit lands with insane power, sending the giant monster stumbling back as its whole body shakes from the shock. The monster stumbles and Kanado slams his fist right through its thick skin, sending dark blood flying everywhere as the beast's claw swings wildly before it finally drops dead. The beast is finally down, and Kanado drops to his knees totally out of breath. He stares at the monster as it finally hits him what just happened. He actually took down a C-rank beast. With the win in the bag, he looks up at the sky and swears to get even stronger, remembering his old promise to make Kanado and the others regret ever messing with him. The local Adventurers Guild is this massive, tough-looking stone building, and things are already popping off inside. Kanado tells the receptionist this mission will be over in a flash, then heads out looking totally confident as she tells him to stay safe. Just as he starts to run, a massive hand pops out of nowhere and stops him dead in his tracks. It's the guildmaster Ansa, who coolly asks if he's in a rush and tells him to stop running, leaving a totally stunned Kanado to give a super awkward apology. After a quick scolding, Ant starts watching him closely and points out that Kanado has definitely leveled up. But Kanado just acts like it's no big deal while the receptionist watches them. Ansa realizes this isn't just small talk because the guy's body, eyes, and speed are so insane he looks like a totally different person. As Kanado heads out, the receptionist thinks he's reached a crazy high level, but Ansa isn't so sure since he can't tell his true power just by looking at it. Now he's super curious, so he spins back to the receptionist to ask if Kanado is taking on any more jobs today. She checks the records and sees him looking through the logbook. She explains that Kanado only ever picks the easiest, most boring jobs imaginable. For example, he'll take a quest just... She laughs it off and tells the guildmaster he's just seeing things, since nobody levels up that fast just by doing basic chores. The guildmaster Ansa just stood there quietly, watching the rookie pick out a mission from the quest board. Kanado spotted a quest for horn rabbits and figured they'd be perfect for fusion, so he decided to head out and tame one. Just as he turned to leave with the quest slip, Ansa's voice boomed from behind, shouting for him to stop. He stopped in his tracks, turned back to the guildmaster and the receptionist, and asked if they needed something. Before he can even answer, two massive buff dudes step up and block Kanado's path with total death stares. The guy with the mohawk says his name is Norsher and his buddy is Razzle. Then he looks right at Kanado and calls him out as Arga, the E rank. They were shouting about how Kanato is a total legend for hitting S rank at just 18, and now every adventurer is dying to join his squad. Kanado looked totally wiped as the truth finally hit him. He couldn't believe a weakling like him actually lasted in that party for 2 whole years. He just waved them off, telling them to quit being jealous since he didn't care anymore, but that made them snap and scream that his attitude was the whole problem, leaving Kanado totally lost. Razzle totally flipped out, yelling at Argo for acting all happy when he's the one causing drama for their idol, while Norsher told him to stay in his lane and Raz. He stares them down with a cold look, refusing to back down and asking why he should feel bad when Trash just used him like a tool. Razzle screams in his face, calling, "These guys are totally losing their minds," so the B-rank duo pulls their weapons as Norsher swings a giant club and screams he's gonna humble this E-rank kid, while Razzle yells that he's tired of being looked down on. He whips out his own curved blade and calmly asks why they're starting a fight in the guild, while the receptionist totally panics and begs her boss Ansa to step in and stop them. The guildmaster stays totally cool and tells the worried receptionist to just wait and watch, since he's dying to see how much stronger Arda has really got. Ansa watches as Norsher and Razzle drop a massive double-team attack, but Ken Otto doesn't even flinch, catching both their blades with his gloved hand like it's absolutely nothing. He shuts down their attack like it's nothing, flips their own power against them, and sends them both flying with one super smooth hit. Both guys slammed into the floor, one clutching his stomach and the other face-planting hard, while Ansa and the stunned receptionist watched the whole fight end in a total flash. Standing over the guys he just wrecked, He asked Wakanda's crew if they were actually brain dead, since everyone knows weapons are totally banned inside the guild. That really hit a nerve. And Norshir and Razzle are fuming because it's so embarrassing to get lectured after getting totally wrecked by a bottom-tier E-rank tamer. Even though they're beaten, they're still fuming and hating how weak they are, but Kanado just stands there, totally unbothered by their useless rage. He shuts down Norshir and Razzle's next attack like it's nothing. And even though these guys are jacked, their hits feel super weak as he blocks them with 0. Something feels super sketchy, and he knows B-rank adventures shouldn't be this slow. After seeing them lose their balance so easily before, he's starting to think they're just acting weak to catch him off guard. He narrows his eyes, totally confused by their move, but he's already locking in a brand new plan. He spins around in a total blur and slams a brutal chop right into Norshir's neck. He was totally playing dumb to bait them into a mistake, but then a massive hit sends Norshir flying across the guild floor. Even with his enemy down, Ken stays low and on guard, wondering if this is just another trap and waiting for them to finally show their real move. Just as the standoff is heating up, a massive hand goes up and shuts the whole thing down. Ansa, the guildmaster, jumps right between them, calling Kanado Argusen and telling him to chill. But Kanado is still totally on edge and tells him to move because he's sure these guys are still up to something. Ansa just shakes his head and says the fight is totally over, pointing at the guy on the ground to show that neither of them can even move anymore because, while the guild girl takes care of the knocked-out Norshir, she tells a confused Kanado that B-ranks aren't actually weak, and the only reason he's surprised is because he listens as the guildmaster, Ansa, explains that everyone already gets it. Kanado has become way too powerful for their group to handle. Ansa explains that the tamer totally wrecked those two loudmouths without even calling out his monsters, and his insane moves prove he's way stronger than an E-rank since R. Now that things are getting way too real, Anso puts a hand on Kanado's shoulder and tells him he's got to chill out, leaving Kanado so shocked he can barely manage to say, okay. All he can think about is holding back because it finally hits him that he's become so insanely powerful he has to nerf himself in every fight, and he just walks away completely stunned by the realization. Ansel watches him head out through the window, looking like he's got a lot on his mind. The guild receptionist walks up to Ansa, totally shocked by how Argusan got so strong so fast, but Ansa tells her he has no idea how it happened either. Suddenly, a girl with long light hair jumps in and says his secret second job is definitely connected, and even though she doesn't have the full story yet, she's going to find out. The receptionist looks over and asks if she's talking about the same person, since she definitely heard her mention a second job. Before she can even say a word, everyone in the guild hall spots her, and the whispers turn into total shock when the receptionist gasps out her name. It's Sisle. Turns out this woman is actually Sisle Luce Sergal, the strongest SSS rank adventurer alive, and she's just chilling at the table with a smirk like she knows exactly what's going on. She was totally locked in with wide, curious eyes, straight up asking the guildmaster to tell her everything about that guy from earlier. Deep inside the cave, a giant centipede monster explodes out of a crack in the wall, with all its creepy legs scratching for a grip. The monster suddenly appears, and the young tamer dives for cover, looking back in total terror with sweat pouring down his face as the beast corners him in a tight hallway. He scrambles onto a higher ledge to catch his breath, but looking back at the blocked path, he realizes there's no way back and things just got way more dangerous. His fear turns into pure rage as he grabs his cloak and curses Kanado for this mess. But he suddenly snaps his head around when he hears that exact name mentioned nearby. As the shadows creep out of the cave, Sisle is just standing there in his baggy surgical gear, looking totally calm right in front of him. She gives him a sweet smile like everything is totally fine, so the shocked tamer asks why she's all alone in a place like this, and Sisle explains she's just looking. Sisle mentions she can tell the others have already taken off. She asks the tamer if he knows where they went, but he just stays quiet with a look of pure hatred on his face. He's dead silent, replaying the moment his old squad betrayed him, especially Nemeraz, who called him a trash tamer before kicking him out and leaving him in the dust. Snapping him back to reality, Sisle switches gears and asks if he's heard anything from Kanado about the person known as the former Artiquin. The tamer looks totally fed up, admitting he's sick of hearing about Arga because everyone always compared them. He remembers people constantly yelling that Arga would have known a monster's name when he didn't, while Sisle listens closely, noting that Arga's monster knowledge was supposedly even better than her own. Back in that dark dungeon, Sisle's eyes lit up as she grilled the lonely tamer, asking if he knew what the legendary Argus could actually do. He said it was true, especially those wild rumors about Arga's insane talent for breeding different monsters together. He flashed back to the day he got kicked out, hearing Nemeris scream that he was a total loser compared to Arga, even though he tried to argue that Arga's powers were on a whole different level that no regular tamer could ever match. He told Sisle that Argo's old squad saw him pull off so many miracles that they actually thought his insane skills were just the basic standard for every other tamer. Sisle leaned in, totally hyped, and demanded he spill every single detail. Over in a lonely, rocky wasteland, Kanado is just standing there with a serious frown, totally stuck in his own head. He stared at his newly evolved dragon, thinking back to how it suddenly started glowing the moment it leveled up. He definitely didn't see this coming. He realized Lala had evolved into a tiny chimera dragon, but man, those mismatched limbs looked straight up gross to him. He felt totally crushed by guilt and took all the blame, realizing that his lazy habit of fusing Lala with random weak monsters had completely ruined her evolution path. The stats weren't bad, but he was still pretty let down until he suddenly sensed something nearby and called for his monster, Kidra. He follows that weird vibe he felt and finds a massive circular pit in the ground, with stone stairs winding down to a dark doorway that leads straight into a labyrinth. He drops down into the pit with his monster squad, Kidra, Lily, and Lily, as they all stand before the stone door ready to dive into the darkness. He checks out the path and calls it a total beginner dungeon, feeling super confident they can breeze through it with their current strength. He knows exactly what he's here for. Lala's evolution is going off the rails, and he has to fix it. So he heads into the maze for fusion materials, gives Kidra a pat and orders his squad to charge straight in. The second they step inside, a lizard man with a jagged blade lunges straight at Kidra while creepy bug monsters crawl all over the place. Kanado reacts instantly to the surprise attack, dropping low and pulling his weapon with a serious look to shut them down. He ignores the lizard man and sprints right past him, yelling at his friends to forget the weaklings because he's finally spotted his real target, a metal stag beetle that has the exact. The second he spots his target, he jumps into action shouting, "Found one!" as his hand starts glowing to use his taming skill on the beetle. He tries to use his power, but it's not working. The beetle goes wild and shakes off the spell. He tries one more time and fails again, and the light in his hand just fades away. After failing over and over, the truth finally hits him hard. He grinds his teeth and shouts in frustration as he remembers the big rule. A tamer only gets 3 shots at taming a monster. Taming it was a total fail, so he just went for the kill and sliced that metal beetle's armor wide open in one clean hit. The XP from that kill shot his level up 6 times instantly, and he decided that if he couldn't tame the next monster, he'd just take its points and keep diving deeper into the dungeon. Somewhere else in the cave, Sisle was thinking about Arga and how he fused those monsters into new colors, wondering if they got a power boost too, and realizing they were both becoming insanely strong. The abandoned tamer asked her why she thought that, and mentioned he'd actually heard some rumors about Arga himself. Sisle confirmed exactly what he was thinking and dropped the news about the crazy rumor that Argo was fusing a baby dragon. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking and this massive centipede with way too many eyes bursts out with a crazy screech, making the abandoned tamer scream his head off. Even with a massive beast towering over them, Sisle stayed totally chill, and while the terrified tamer thanked her for helping him confirm the truth, she just shrugged it off and said she was lucky. She gave him a sweet smile and said he was actually lucky because now he could finally ditch those jerks who abandoned him and ran back to the surface. In a total blur, her blade flashes out and chops that terrifying giant centipede straight in half. She put her sword away and offered to lead him out, but the second the tamer saw that jet black blade, he completely lost it, realizing he was standing right in front of the legendary SSS rank adventurer. Fresh out of the labyrinth, Sisle tells Guildmaster Ansa about a strange guy named Arga, who's both a tamer and a fusionist, and Ansa is instantly hooked. The guild receptionist notices Sisle and Arga have been talking a lot, but Sisle shuts down the idea that they're friends and asks if she even knows how strong Arga is, explaining she only watched him because he's a self-taught tamer with a totally weird vibe. He mentions a rumor that Arga has a baby dragon as a sidekick. Ansa explains that this is a huge deal because dragons are basically impossible to tame. These creatures can sense a person's. The guildmaster realizes that if Arga really tamed a dragon, he's a total beast. And even though Sisle hasn't seen it yet, she's hyped about the fusion. She smirks, finally getting the proof she was looking for. With everything confirmed, she's more fired up than ever. Sisle decides it's time to stop waiting and start. She turns her full attention to Kanado, catching him totally off guard, and with a huge, hopeful smile, she tells him he might be the one to finally make her dream come true. Deep in a stone maze, Kanado and his little squad are clashing with a massive horned ogre that's roaring and swinging wild in a super tight hallway. The combo attack keeps going as one of his bird summons pecks the ogre right in the face, forcing the big guy to stumble back in pain. Kanado watches the monster stumble and stays totally chill, noticing the ogre is finally weak enough for him to step in and tame. He's feeling pretty proud of how fast his crew is leveling up, because even a D-rank ogre boss is basically a joke to them now. Even though he's totally beat, the ogre uses every last bit of strength he has left to let out one final epic roar. It lunges forward, swinging a massive fist right at Kanado's face in one last desperate move. That massive punch lands right on target, but Kanado doesn't even flinch and just stands there looking totally unbothered. He's stoked that these D-rank monsters can't even scratch him anymore, so he just grabs the ogre and effortlessly flips it over his shoulder, smashing it into the ground. With the beast twitching on the ground, Kanado puts his hand on its head and activates his taming power. The ogre doesn't get tamed and just vanishes into glowing light, leaving a treasure chest behind that Kanado realizes is a rare boss drop. He stares at the chest in total shock before ripping it open, looking super hyped to see what kind of loot is waiting for. He's strolling through the city in the best mood ever, humming a tune and grinning ear to ear because he just can't believe how lucky he got. Inside the chest is the ogre's super rare drop, the Horn of Battle, and it's totally wild because there are actually 2 of them. He crunches the numbers and realizes that with a single drop being 1 in 10,000 and 2 being 1 in 100,000, he just beat. As he weaves through the crowd, he's already plotting his next move. That horn is worth a massive 1,000 gold coins, plenty to live the easy life for 3 whole years. He decides to keep one and sell the other, but his plan gets totally wrecked when a voice suddenly shouts his old name. Arga. He spins around and gets totally serious when he spots Nimrus in the group, but Nimrus just looks down on him and asks what happened to his body, making him snap back that he's noticing how much he's changed, remembering when he used to be way shorter than Kanado, and wonders if becoming a demon human and leveling up gave him this massive growth spurt. His deep thoughts get totally wrecked when Nemr's girls show up, with the pigtail one asking if he's on drugs and the hooded girl making fun of him for being short. Nemera tunes out the noise and stares at what's in Kanado's hand, pointing in total shock and shouting that a rare ogre drop is impossible, but Kanado just gives him a cold, yep. The girls start roasting him even harder, with the hooded ones calling him a total leech who got it for free, while the pigtail girl accuses him of being a thief until Kanado finally snaps in frustration. He keeps saying his monsters helped him get it, but everyone just laughs and tells him to stop flexing over a basic deer draw. Nimrus flexes on everyone by holding up a ring and bragging that it's a B-rank rear draw. He turns to Kanado and asks if he's jealous, mocking his discovery as a pathetic ghost prince drop and saying that, besides his brains, the guy is total trash. Nimrus gives a cocky smirk and brags that Kanado would be getting all this epic loot if he was still with them, even mockingly saying he can rejoin the party if he begs for it. Sweat drips down his face as he thinks about the offer, and you can see in his tired eyes that he finally gets it. He realizes they're begging for him to come back, and it's totally obvious they're failing the dungeon because they don't know anything about monsters. They're even freaking out over. He lets out a petty laugh because they finally see how valuable he is and want him back. But when he asks who'd actually join them, the hooded woman snaps and asks if he's really turning down their kindness. He finally snaps, spinning around and screaming at them to shut up as his slime, wolf, and dragon explode into view, completely shocking his old crew. The whole group is totally grossed out, with the pigtail girl calling the dragon a nasty freak, Nemera pointing out that hairy wolf, and the hooded lady saying the slime looks the most normal. Kanado's face twisted into a nasty snarl as he barked his final order, telling them to get lost and get out of his sight right now. He turns away with an annoyed click of his tongue, thinking it's just his luck to run into his old squad, while the girl in pigtails calls him a total savage for being so violent, and the rest of the group just glares at him. As he walks away, he locks in, knowing he can't just chill for 3 years anymore because he's going to get so powerful that no one will ever look down on him again. Nimmers watches him walk away with a total scowl, while the hooded girl next to him complains that Arga is a massive pain, and she actually wanted to recruit him again. She asks what they're gonna do now, knowing they'll never beat this dungeon without a monster expert like a tamer. A bit later, Kanado tracks down an old goblin shopkeeper to sell some loot, explaining that his knife is totally worn out from the dungeon and he needs the cash for a new weapon. He drops a single shiny gold coin right onto the wooden counter. He's grinning like crazy thinking he got lucky today, but the shopkeeper just gives him this shady look like he knows exactly what's up. Out of nowhere, the coin in the shopkeeper's hand just crumbles into dust, and the old man lets out a massive scream of pure shock and pain. The shopkeeper totally flips out, calling Kanado a scammer and demanding to know what he's up to. But Kanado's face goes cold as he insists the coin is a... The tension hits a breaking point when four scary dudes show up behind the counter and glare at Kanado, but he just stares right back without even flinching. Kanado didn't even flinch as the thug lunged at him with a knife, realizing this place was way scummier than he thought and definitely needed to be wiped off the map. He easily steps out of the way, sending the thug tumbling past him head over heels. He flashed a sharp grin at the remaining thugs and told them they picked the worst day to mess with him, but then he stopped and wondered if he was actually the unlucky one, while the other guys just... Right in the middle of the standoff, a girl suddenly pops into the tent. She gives a happy wave and calls out to Argacoin like they're best friends. The thugs are totally caught off. Her smile instantly dropped, and with a dead serious look, she told the guy to shut it because they were in the middle of a conversation. In a total flash, the thugs were all knocked out cold on the floor, and Kanado just stood there with his jaw dropped, having no clue what just happened. He was totally stunned as she turned back with a massive smile, excitedly telling him she'd been looking for him everywhere. His head was spinning because he didn't see a thing, but the shopkeeper looked totally terrified and screamed the name Sisle, which immediately caught Kanado's attention. He stared at the girl as her name finally clicked. It was Sisle, the strongest human alive. And even though it was super sudden, he asked if she'd listen to a favor. He got super serious and begged me right to my face to join his party. He let out a confused noise, sweat dripping down his face, totally freaked out by Sisle's calm smile, as he wondered if he was the luckiest guy alive or about to face. Ken Otto is completely blown away that Sisle is asking to join his party. His head starts spinning with all the insane legends he's heard about her. This is Sisle, the hero who wiped out. He's totally suspicious and demands she show him some proof that she's actually the real deal. She stands her ground and tells him exactly who she is, saying her insane power is all the proof he needs. Since talking isn't working, she whips out a massive sword made from an evil god's bone that only she owns, but Kanado stays on guard because he just got scammed by a shady dealer and doesn't trust anyone anymore. He calls them out, saying that showing him a weapon he's never seen before doesn't prove a single thing. She gets totally flustered and calls herself an idiot, saying she should have just shown him her adventure card from the start before pulling it right out of her cleavage. He grabs the card and his eyes go wide when he sees the insane stats. Sisle La Surgle is only 18, but she's a freaking SSS rank with. She explains that no one's been able to touch her in a fight since she was little. And even though Kanado thinks she's a legend, Sisle calls her life a straight-up tragedy. Her story keeps going, showing us how lonely she really was because being the strongest from day one made her life totally boring with zero thrills, and she was dying for something more. She traveled the whole world looking for a real challenge. But whether it was dragons, demon kings, or even gods, they were all total weaklings compared to her, and she realized the only thing she actually needed to satisfy was her hunger. She heard rumors that he confused monsters to make them insanely strong, and she realized he was her big chance. She looks at Kanado with hope, telling him that if he builds the ultimate beast, he starts sweating as her words finally hit him, realizing this is the real reason she wanted to team up in the first place. He thinks it over and agrees to team up, but he's got a catch and tells her he's ready to hear her out before dropping his own rules. As they face off in the shadows, he keeps it simple and demands that she finally fights him. We step through and find a massive coliseum packed with fans going wild, while the empty arena floor waits for the action to start. The whole coliseum is buzzing with rumors. Some think Sisle is here for a duel. Others say it's a tryout for her squad. But everyone showed up just to see what this legendary wild had. Ken Otto spots the massive crowd and realizes those shop guys must have blabbed, which is honestly a total win for him. Down in the arena, she looks up at him with a massive smile, shouting his name in total awe. Argo Cohen. She can tell just by looking that he's gotten insanely strong, and he just grins, saying he's got a promise to keep. He remembers the promise he made a week ago, where he told Sisle he wasn't good enough for her yet, and swore he'd prove he could be the perfect partner in just 7 days. He steps up in front of the whole crowd to accept the challenge, and while Sisle smirks and asks to see what he's really made of, he just gives her a solid yes. Sisle doesn't say a word and just lunges, keeping her sword low as she closes the gap in a total flash. As she gets closer, her energy is so heavy he's not sure he can even win, but he locks in because he knows he can't back down now. The whole crowd is staring, and while one guy recognizes Arga, he can tell he's totally different now, making everyone wonder if this is really the same dude who used to be Kanado's sidekick. The crowd's trash talk is ringing in his ears, and he knows that if he joins Sisle now, Everyone's just gonna clown him for being a total sidekick. He's finally locked in and promises he's done running, because he's going to take this head on and show everyone what he's really made of. Arga finally locks in and lets his emotions explode, making the crowd scream that he's a totally different person, while Sisle watches in shock as he moves faster than ever before. He keeps the pressure on as sparks and dust fly across the arena, thinking back to how just 1 week of intense fusion boosted him over 100 levels and unlocked a ton of crazy new skills. Even with Sisle's insane growth, he thinks her defense is impossible to crack, but she's the one who feels totally stuck, like she's facing a giant wall with... The fight takes a breather, and Sisle looks at Argo in total awe, praising him for actually holding his own, but then she hits him with the ultimate roast, saying he's only as strong as she was when she was 2 years old, leaving him sweating and completely stunned. He keeps the pressure on, and the whole crowd is losing it because he's actually going toe-to-toe with Sisle, a guy who's famous for deleting evil gods in a split second. He lunged through the air with his dagger ready to end it, but Sisle stayed totally calm and kept her eyes locked right on him. He rushed in but suddenly realized his black dragon weapon from that sketchy merchant was going to snap the second it hit her sword made from an evil god's bone. Sisle snaps him out of his head, saying she totally expected him to use his monsters, but she's benching hers so they don't die. And don't worry, she won't touch his either. Her words give him the perfect opening, so he lunges forward and yells that accidents happen all the time. He gives the signal, and his wolf, slime, and dragon all lunge at Sisle from every direction at once. Sisle finally lost her cool and her eyes went wide, screaming that he was a total cheater since she'd just promised not to use her own monsters. She fell right into his trap, so he used those monsters as a distraction to sneak behind her, knowing even the world's strongest fighter is wide open from the back. Just as his dagger was about to hit her back, she stayed totally calm without even turning around, telling him it was a smart move, right? As she blocked his strike like it was nothing. Right then, she just flicked her hand and swatted those 3 monsters away like flies, sending them flying through the air. Ken just stood there, totally losing his mind. His 3 friends got blasted away in the blink of an eye. He rushed over to check on them and was so glad they were still breathing. But he felt super guilty and apologized, knowing their sacrifice was the only reason he got close. But it turns out it was all for nothing. Before he can even process what happened, Sisle has her weapon right at his throat. She calmly tells him, "Yep, I win." Still on his knees, Kanado is losing. He was totally blown away by how she used that insane power like it was no big deal. But his loss actually hyped the crowd up, and Ansa started yelling that it was an epic fight and he finally respects Timmers. He looked up with a smirk, finally realizing no one would ever laugh at his job again. And when Sisle asked if he was happy and invited him to be her partner, Articu. 2 days go by, and the new duo is already staring down the massive front gates of the Aranka KIP lab. Sisle looked over and asked if he wanted to see her skills, so he nodded and said he knew she could wreck people. But he really wanted to see how she'd handle actual monsters in a real fight. In a total flash, a massive monster was already dead on the ground, and when Sisle asked for his take, a sweating Kanado admitted he couldn't even see her move and begged her. She explains that her real power is basically invisible and she can wipe out A-rank monsters in a heartbeat, which totally blows his mind, but Sisle says they'd need an S-beat. Sisle's face lit up with pure excitement as she shouted that he was officially taking the promotion exam. She shouts that she's aiming for SSS rank, but Kanado keeps it real and reminds her he needs to be S rank just to step foot in those dungeons. He starts doubting himself, but Sisle quickly tells him he's got this and offers to hook him up with a recommendation for the exam. Her smile vanished in a heartbeat, and she looked totally terrified. She finally realized how insane his situation really was. If he actually hit the highest rank possible, what would that even mean for him? Just thinking. Nemera's squad stops right in front of a terrifying SS rank dungeon entrance, and while the girl with pigtails is totally shaking despite their plan, the hooded woman next to her just shrugs. Nemeris locks in and shouts that they can smash through even without Arga. Then he flashes a confident grin and says they don't even need a tamer at all. The hooded girl is hyped, shouting that they're gonna crush the dungeon and hit SS rank without that loser's help. Outside the Adventurers Guild, Kanado is hanging out with Ansa and the girl in the winged hat when another guy walks up to ask if he's heard any news about his old crew. He glances back with a totally blank face and confirms he heard they're actually using chicken tactics now. The other guy calls their plan trash, but Ken Otto explains they're just skipping the weak mobs to poison the boss, proving these guys don't value knowledge at all, since they were so quick to. The mustache guy mutters that any pro should know how valuable a tamer's info is, while Ansa stands right in front of a closed door. He pushes the door open, and the girl with the medical bag is right on his heels. The door swings open into a massive, super bright room that's totally empty, except for a few other doors on the walls. Ansa walks inside and immediately starts apologizing to someone off-screen for the way he's been acting. He faces Kanato and Sisle in the room, telling Kanato his growth is totally insane, and he finally gets why he's ready to take on the SSS rank challenge. He keeps the conversation going and mentions that Sisle already told him they've officially teamed up as a party. Suddenly, a booming voice cuts them off as a massive guy with pointy ears calls Ansa master and tells them to quit the yapping and get moving. Kanato's face gets super serious when the guy acts like a jerk, so Ansa jumps in to introduce the new person properly. He introduces Raja, a legendary SSS rank adventurer who's actually the examiner for today's big promotion test. Kanato realizes Raja looks super familiar and asks if they've met, but Raja tells him he's probably thinking of his brother Razzle instead. Kanato finally remembers that Razzle is the same jerk who tried to fight him at the guild, and Raja looks totally serious as he confirms they're actually brothers. Roger totally snaps, yelling that Kanato beat his brother so bad he's been a shut-in ever since, but Kanato just says Razzle deserved it for starting the fight, and even though Ants tries to chill everyone out, Roger loses his mind and screams that he's going to kill him. Ansei jumps right between them to stop the chaos, making them face each other while he gets ready to drop the rules for the test. The rules are super basic. They're going to throw down, and if Kanato can just pull off a draw, he passes, but right now they're staring each other down in the vibes. He gets jumped immediately as Raja lets out a massive roar and swings his blade down, trying to chop him right in half. Kanato is totally shook by the pure bloodlust in that swing, while Roger screams that the first hit wins, and he's definitely going for the kill. He moves in a flash, dropping low and sliding away from that deadly hit as the blade slams into the dirt. But Roger just keeps on smirking like he's totally in control. Raja keeps raining down blows, mocking the guy for just playing defense and daring him to actually fight back, all while the guild receptionist starts to seriously panic. The receptionist starts panicking and tells Sisle they have to step in, since Roger totally cheated with a cheap surprise attack right from the start. Sisle stays totally chill, giving the worried receptionist a grin and promising that this fight will be over in a heartbeat. She's acting way too confident while the fight heats up, because Raja is totally dominating, and it looks like Kanato is about to get wrecked. The examiner totally loses it, laughing like a maniac and screaming for his opponent to die with every single swing of his sword. Roger's wild swinging leaves a huge opening, and his crazy face turns to pure shock when he catches Kanato's cold, deadly stare. Kanato blurs forward and lands a massive punch that sends Raja flying into the wall, knocking his weapon right out of his hand. He watched Raja lying there in total shock, completely wiped out by the insane power of that one single hit. The guild receptionist was totally losing it, wondering how he even survived that sneak attack when he should have been completely finished. He played it cool and said he knew the guy would fight dirty, so he was ready for anything from the jump. And Ansa the guildmaster noticed Kanato looked caught off guard, but Kanato just said he was shocked by how slow Raj was moving, which made the defeated examiner on the floor totally lose his mind. Suddenly, it clicked. What if they were moving slow on purpose just to make him drop his guard? His brain was going a mile a minute as he realized this move felt just like Raj's brother, and he got a total chill down his spine as everything finally started to click. But he was actually one step ahead, faking a stumble just to see how Roger would react, and that's when he realized it wasn't a trick. Roger really was that slow. The receptionist was totally confused and asked why he kept dodging such a slow opponent, but he explained he was just waiting for the perfect moment to knock Raja out without actually killing him. Ansa finally drops the truth, revealing that Kanato was only holding back because Nemera ordered him to. The guildmaster stared Kanato down to make sure he got the message, reminding him that Nimmers wanted him to finally chill out and stop going overboard. He definitely held back his power, and Ansel just watched with a smirk, thinking about how much Arda had finally leveled up. Ansa slapped a hand on his shoulder and yelled out the final result. "You passed!" The announcement echoed through the whole guild hall, making it official that Argo Billion is finally an SSS rank adventurer. He showed off a clean white card with the 3 letters that proved he was finally at the highest rank. He gripped his brand new card as the receptionist told him he could finally enter any labyrinth he wanted. Kanato was totally stunned at how easily he'd reached SSS rank, but Sisle just asked what the plan was and reminded him she knew he'd be just fine. He admitted that having too many choices is actually a huge pain, so the receptionist suggested they throw a massive promotion party to celebrate while they think. And Cinnamon Sisle was totally on board as she shouted, But the party vibes died in a heartbeat when they saw two familiar faces collapsed on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. His jaw dropped as he realized who they were, and the only thing running through his head was, "It's you guys!" They looked up with faces covered in dirt and pure desperation, as Rebecca and Norsha both screamed at the top of their lungs for Arga to save them. Rewind to a few hours ago, deep inside some creepy, vine-covered ruins where you can just feel the danger in the air. Nimura and the two girls are hauling it up these ancient stone stairs, desperately trying to outrun a danger they can't even see. They're almost out, but then a massive stone pillar slams down, crushing the stairs and sending chunks of rock flying. Nimura stops dead in his tracks and admits their pursuer is way too strong, but his hooded friend screams at him to keep moving if he ever wants to reach that legendary SS rank. Suddenly, a massive beast steps out of the dark, staring them down with glowing white eyes and a mouthful of sharp fangs. The pigtail girl sees the beast and wants to bail with the stone, but Nimura says they're trapped and straight up pushes her off the ledge toward the monster. His hooded partner screams his name, asking what the heck he's doing, but Nimura yells back that Ratone will be totally fine with her defense magic, insisting this is their only shot. He and the other girl trigger the return stone and vanish in a flash of light, but he shouts a final fake apology to Ratone, who looks totally betrayed and terrified as she's left to face the monster all by herself. Back in the present, Kanado just stares blankly as Nimura finishes the story. Then he coldly says they basically just ditched Ratone and ran, making Nimura snap and beg Arga to help. He looks down at his old leader with a smug grin, reminding them that since they're tamers, they should already know how to beat this monster, so why are they crawling back to... He stopped for a second to think about their desperate plea. The hooded woman didn't trust him, asking if he even cared about being kicked out. He looked up with a totally blank face and finally, he agreed, but there was a massive catch. He flashed a smug grin and said, "It's a shame, but as a lowly E rank, he's not even allowed inside SAS. The two adventurers stomped off in total disgust as Nimura kept cursing that tamer for wasting their time, but then she suddenly remembered something huge. He flashed his adventurer card with a massive grin, showing off his brand new high rank and laughing about how he totally forgot he'd been promoted. Nimura is totally losing it, stuttering that an SSS rank is impossible and accusing him of faking the whole thing, but Kanado just shrugs it off, gets his SSS dungeon. Sisle looked at him with total disgust, asking how he could ever be friends with such trash, and Kanado just gave a little smirk, admitting he was actually pretty shocked himself. His face went totally serious as he made a huge promise. He was going to save her no matter what. He laid down the law, saying he'd save Ratone and bring her back solo because his old team would just get in the way, which totally made Nemeris flip out. He turned his back on them and announced that he and Sisle were taking over the labyrinth conquest, leaving the hooded woman completely shook when she realized his partner was the world's strongest fighter, while Nimura screamed that it was impossible for a legend like Sisle to be hanging out with Kanado. They were totally shocked, but the hooded woman saw a huge opening and Nimura finally agreed to the plan, while Kanado and Sisle stood ready as a powerful new team. He's standing right in front of the massive Exiled labyrinth, which is totally covered in these giant ancient tree roots. Sisle asks for a second to fuse her monsters before they head. She brushed off his worries and told him his old crew were just heartless trash, so he didn't owe those selfish jerks a single thing. He straight up said he wasn't helping because he figured Ratone was already a goner. And with a wicked smirk, he revealed he wasn't there to save anyone. He was there. He told them his revenge was to easily crush the same enemy that the people who mocked him couldn't even touch. His eyes narrowed as he locked in, ready to make them regret everything, and he slammed his finger right onto the fuse button in his system. Sisle realized what was up and asked if that was really all he had, but he just smirked and said he was just getting started as a crazy bright light blasted out of his monster. The light gets crazy bright and swallows them whole, and while Sisle is totally freaking out, Kanado stays chill because he knows this is the start of an evolution. Once the light faded, Sisle was totally stunned by the beast, admitting she'd never seen anything like it, while Ken Otto just watched closely, hyped to see what would happen next. Deep in the stone hallways, the newly evolved fox beast totally destroyed a metal beetle, ripping its armor to shreds with pure power. As they headed deeper into the dungeon, Kanado complained that it was pretty boring since they hadn't reached the SS rank zone yet, but Sisle just roasted him, saying his old team was so... While they keep moving, Kanado starts roasting his old team, saying their chicken tactics were honestly just pathetic. He explains that poisoning an immune boss is a total waste of time, and even though the dungeon's traps just deleted one of his monsters, He's still distracted by a weird detail that doesn't add up. Sisle thinks the story sounds super fishy and reveals the dungeon boss is actually a vampire, while Ken Otto admits he's mostly just shocked his old team even made it out alive. She explains that vampires are way too proud to let their dinner run away, so they definitely used magic to mess with those return stones. He agrees that even if they used 2 teammates as blood bags, a normal vampire still wouldn't have let the rest of the squad escape. Sisle gets a sudden idea and wonders if this vampire is actually just a mutant. They stop in front of a giant arched door, and she warns him that if it's a vampire princess or noble, they're dealing with an SSS rank monster that's way more powerful than even SSR vampires. Kanado asks why a beast that powerful would ever let them go, but Sisle just shrugs and says that sometimes things like that just happen. Suddenly, a sword flies through the air, zooming straight for that massive stone door. The sword shatters into a million pieces on the floor, and Hinata just stares at the mess, looking totally bored. He stared down the open door as a voice laughed from the shadows, giving him props for actually dodging that blood sword attack. A girl steps out of the shadows looking like total vampire royalty, and with a cocky smirk, she introduces herself as the great princess Reina Larilcia, telling them they should feel lucky they even survived her first hit. Her big speech didn't scare him at all, and he just narrowed his eyes, calling her out as the sissy's rank mutant they were all expecting, the vampire princess. He turns to Sisle, and she doesn't even hesitate, telling him she totally trusts him to handle the rest of the fight. Just as she puts her faith in him, a dark, swirling void opens up on the stone floor right in front of him, totally catching Sisle off guard. 2 insane monsters jump out of a swirling portal, a wild wolf and a giant beast with a ram skull for a head, while Kanado just stands there looking totally cool and ready to fight. Watching the screen, the vampire princess Reina just smirked, realizing he was a tamer but laughing because his weak monsters would never even touch her. Inside the wrecked ruins, the vampire princess Reina looks totally smug as she faces her enemies with a massive ram-skulled monster looming right behind her, while Kanado and Sisle stand there. Reina promises she won't forget his name, and Kanado finally realizes he's looking at the vampire princess Reina, an SSS rank monster, which explains exactly why they all got totally crushed. He locks in and tells her she's the first SSS rank monster he's ever going to take down, so he's definitely never going to forget her. He introduces himself as Arga and tells her to remember the name of the guy who's going to end her, while Reina's confidence vanishes and turns into pure silent rage. She totally snaps, her face twisting in pure rage as she growls, hating that he's actually looking down on her. She screams in total rage and lunges forward, calling him a massive idiot as her sharp claws fly right at it. As she rushes in, Kanado points forward and barks an order to his crew. "La, Lily, go!" Lily the wolf instantly jumps in like a white blur, meeting Reina's attack head-on and swinging her massive claws with a powerful swipe. They crash into each other so hard that they both get blasted backward through the air. Lily hits the ground and has zero time to catch her breath before the Ramskull monster charges, aiming its massive horns right at her. As her monster clashed with the wolf, Reina had to dodge Avalia's shots and screamed at her bees to get out of her way. The 2 bees slammed into each other with a massive boom, turning into a total blur of fur and bone. That hit sent the Ramskull monster stumbling back and totally killed its momentum. Reina didn't even look at the monsters fighting as she soared through the air and pounced on Kanado like a total predator. She growled with pure hate, screaming for him to die full of regret as she lunged in for the kill. But she didn't even touch him because he moved like a blur, snatched her arms, and totally shut the vampire princess down. He stayed chill while sizing up her insane SSS rank power, admitting that even though he'd buffed La and Lily for the toughest dungeons, this fight was way more intense than he planned for. She just stood there in total shock, admitting she was only using the fight as a test to see how strong his monsters really were. He squeezed her even harder and cursed under his breath. But she was so furious he'd even try this that she started fighting back like crazy. Her anger instantly turned into pure terror, and as she stared at him with wide eyes, she finally screamed out, "Are you even human?" She asked if he was even human, but instead of answering, he just launched her across the clearing with one massive kick. She let out a scream as she skidded across the ground, taking the full force of the hit before finally sliding to a stop. He just watched her, admitting she was the strongest enemy he'd ever faced. But he had to tell her one thing. She still wasn't as powerful as this. Before she could even think, he lunged forward and buried a heavy hit right in her gut, leaving her gasping in total shock and pain. She stumbled back but refused to quit, grabbing a fancy dagger from her hip that started glowing with a strange magical light. She charged at him with a scream, but he just mocked her for losing her cool while easily dodging her wild attack. He swung his sword with perfect aim, smashing her dagger into a million pieces. He didn't hesitate for a second, slamming his hand into her with a hit so powerful it sent a shockwave through her entire body. That hit completely knocked the wind out of her, leaving her gasping for air with blood dripping from her mouth as all that insane power surged through her. Her shock and pain instantly turned into pure rage as she glared at Arga, swearing she'd never forgive him while her dark energy exploded, ready to wipe him out with her ultimate magic. She fires off her ultimate move, filling the entire sky with a massive storm of glowing magic arrows. These shots whistle through the air with deadly aim, and she brags that absolutely nobody has ever survived this magic before. Even with a massive attack heading their way, Kanado and Sisle just stare it down with totally blank faces. She gets super hyped and starts screaming at the top of her lungs for her enemy to just die already. He doesn't even flinch, just standing his ground as that wave of deadly attacks heads straight for him. Her smug smile instantly turns into total shock, and he just glances at the tiny dragon on his shoulder, telling Lala to fire off a massive blast. The little guy reacts by opening his mouth and charging up a crazy amount of energy inside his tiny body. It lets loose a massive spinning blast of energy that charges forward to smash right into the incoming attack. The dragon's breath slams right into the first wave of magic arrows and starts totally wrecking them. The vampire's ultimate move is totally useless, and his attacks just vanish into thin air while the dragon breath keeps blasting forward. As the steam clears, he sees Reina shaking against a burnt wall. Her ultimate move completely failed, and she's staring in total terror with her confidence absolutely crushed. He stays totally chill and tells her that her insane magic might have worked on anyone else, but it's useless against a tamer. He tells her the fight is over and turns to leave, but Reina suddenly begs for mercy and surrenders, leaving him totally caught off guard. Her pride totally vanishes as she breaks down in tears, screaming apologies and begging him to spare her life. The whole crew is totally stunned by this sudden breakdown, with Sisle freaking out at the sight while Kanado gets super awkward seeing Reina cry and give up like that. Sisle is totally loving the drama, telling Kanado it's super rare to see a proud vampire princess crying and begging for her life. But Kanado still has no clue what his next. Just as he starts to hesitate, Reina suddenly gets super formal and calls him Arga-sama, saying she has a favor to ask, while Sisle gets totally hyped and begs him to hear the princess. He's totally caught off guard by her acting so humble, so he nervously asks what she wants while she's still tearing up. And that's when Reina finally begs to use his insane power. She looks up at him, looking totally desperate but also dead serious, and then she drops a total bombshell. "Please, kill my father." Those insane words leave Kanado and Sisle completely frozen, and all he can do is stutter out a confused, "What?" Standing in that massive tiled room, Kanado was totally stunned as he repeated the vampire princess's crazy request, "Kill your father," and Reina starts explaining that this whole mess kicked off about a month ago, and Kanado realizes things must be seriously crazy for a proud vampire princess to want her own dad dead. So everything started in the room she shared with her dad, a high-ranking vampire noble, when 3 creepy hooded guys suddenly appeared, but they both figured they'd just crush these intruders like. This fight was on a whole other level, and Reina said those church guys were insanely strong, with nothing but creepy smiles peeking out from the shadows. These guys were way too strong, pinning her dad down and sticking a mystery needle into his neck before vanishing into thin air. That stuff was straight-up nightmare fuel, and Reina explained that ever since that day, her dad has been losing his mind and turning into a total savage beast. Back in the present, he starts crying all over again as he remembers her saying she couldn't stand seeing him suffer anymore, and that the only way to finally set him free was to. After Reina's heavy request, Sisle turns to Kanado to see what he's going to do, while Reina admits she's too weak to face her dad alone and has been waiting for someone strong enough to finally take him down. While Kanado thought over the deal, Reina's face went totally cold, and even with tears in her eyes, she looked ready to finish this once and for all. The vampire princess was totally relieved when he agreed, and Kanado kept it real. They had to crush her dad to clear the dungeon anyway, plus he was just super curious. Sisle explained why the drug used on Reina's dad was super fishy, since real priests hate medicine and only use holy magic, meaning the attackers were definitely fakes. He turned back to the vampire princess and finally said yes, but he had one major catch, and Reina didn't even flinch as she told him she was ready for anything. She leaned in close with a massive blush and asked him to be gentle for her first time, making him jump back in total shock and scream, "Wait! What exactly do you think we're doing?" Sisle jumped in and called Reina a total creep, screaming that her body definitely wasn't the price, while a super embarrassed Kanado shouted that he just wanted her to join his party. That explanation just left Reina even more shocked. Her eyes went wide as she skipped right past being friends and started imagining their wedding. Kanado was totally losing it because she was jumping too. He laid down the law and told her that since he didn't trust her, he was going to tame her and take total control, warning that if she tried anything sneaky, he'd lock her away in the shadows. Reina totally took his words the wrong way and started blushing, thinking they'd get married once she proved she was trustworthy, but he just ignored her and told her to hurry up and take Almi. They followed her down a twisty stone staircase deep into the earth, and when Sisle asked if her dad was down there, Reina said yeah, he's got a super weird obsession with living underground lately. He looked around the dark, massive cave that felt just like a vampire's den, while Sisle pointed out all the other tunnels leading deeper into the underground base. He asks Reina if she's seen any idiots around, and after a second she remembers a group of 3, 1 guy and 2 girls. He stood in the cave looking totally serious, while Sisle thought back on how they even got here, remembering how Kanado's old crew used cheap tricks to get through the dungeon before running into. The 3 of them head deeper inside, looking like tiny specks compared to how massive and creepy this underground room is. As they kept moving, a nasty smell hit them so hard it made Kanado gag, but Reina knew that scent anywhere and realized her dad was definitely close by. She barely finished her sentence before a massive clawed hand slammed down, completely smashing the stone floor right in front of them. Out of the smoke steps this terrifying monster that's basically skin and bones, except for its massive buff arms that almost touch the ground while steam pours off its body. The monster was munching on something invisible, and it looked totally nasty, so a grossed-out Kanado finally stepped up and summoned his tiny slime pal, yelling, "Lulu, come on out!" He explains to Sisle that even though the slime isn't a big threat, it can actually cure poison, so he's betting everything on this risky last resort while the little guy shakes with nerves. Right before it could even move, the slime started glowing super bright. Kanado watched in total shock as he realized what was happening right then and there. This was it. The slime was finally evolving. Suddenly, the little guy exploded with power, catching him and Reina totally off guard. Once the light clears, Lulu is totally different. Now she's a massive pitch-black octopus monster with huge, unblinking eyes staring straight ahead. It morphed into a black slime called a Shoggoth, and Kanado saw its stats were way higher than anything he'd ever run into before. While Kanato wondered where this freak came from, Sisle got dead serious and remembered fighting an evil god who used these Shoggoths as its personal soldiers. She warned them that these evil god monsters have a terrifying power called mental contamination that literally drives people insane. Suddenly, it all clicked for Kanado. Reina's dad smelled just like that evil god drug he was injected with, and he finally realized that's what caused the crazy transformation that messed up his head. Sisle figured that just being around the evil god's nasty vibe and smell might have forced Lulu to evolve, even if she wasn't totally certain. The truth hit Reina like a truck. She squeezed her fist, finally seeing that the church was full of fakes. She cried out in pain, wondering why they would do something so messed up to her. She stopped crying the second her monster dad spotted them, and when Kanado asked if she was really ready for him to end it, Reina didn't hesitate and gave him the green light. With her blessing giving him a boost, he locks in and faces that nasty monster head-on as it lunges right at him. He charged straight ahead with his sword out, knowing that even a vampire who can heal from anything dies if you take its head off, so he was going to slice it clean off. He was charging and full of confidence, but then he spotted something that made him stop dead in his tracks, his face turning to pure shock as he realized exactly what was standing right in front of him. He freezes in total shock as the monster's giant fist stops just inches away from his face. That split second of hesitation costs him big time. The monster's fist slams into him, sending him tumbling across the dirt. Reina screams his name, wondering why he froze up at the worst possible unts. He's desperately dodging the non-stop attacks while the monster goes totally berserk, smashing the stone floor to bits with every single hit. He ducks another hit as Reina screams for him to back up and find a gap, so he pushes himself off the floor and grits his teeth, letting her know he's on. The monster isn't giving him a break, letting out a massive roar as it lunges straight for him again. It swings like crazy, and he barely dives away as a massive punch smashes the ground right where he was standing a second ago. He's frantically hunting for a new plan. He knows that just blinding this monster isn't going to be enough to stop it. All he needs to do is stall for a few more seconds. He kicks the plan into gear and yells for Lulu, Then the tiny slime floats up and pulses with rings of energy that cause total madness and confusion. Those rings fly in fast and smack the monster right in the back of the head, making it reel back as a surge of energy shocks its brain. The hit lands, and while Kanto watches with a serious face, Reina and Sisle stare on, feeling both terrified and hopeful. The mental blast hits home, and the monster's face twists in a silent scream as its brain gets totally wrecked. It goes absolutely wild, swinging its massive arms everywhere and screaming in total pain. The monster slams into the ground and starts twitching like crazy from the confusion spell, while Kanata just stands there watching. He lets out a huge sigh and cracks a smile because his power actually worked. Just as he starts to relax, Reina snaps him out of it by asking Arga if he's zoning out. So he admits he saw someone he hates and lost his focus, muttering that those people are still finding ways to drag him down. Right there in the wreckage, Rainer's transformed dad is totally stuck and looks like he's in pure misery. Sisle thinks this monster is the one Kanado ditched, and since vampires can't turn people to stone, she bets an evil god's power woke up that ability, though can't. He stops overthinking and turns back to Reina, apologizing for the wait and promising to wrap this up in a heartbeat. Nothing he says makes her feel better, and Reina's just sobbing as she watches her dad on the floor, clutching his head in total agony. Kanado sees how much Reina is hurting and makes a huge call, ordering Lulu to shut down the madness spell immediately. Sisle is totally shocked and asks what he's thinking, but Kanado explains that even if the beast is out of its mind, it's still his friend's father. He pulls out a sharp blade with a look of pure focus, deciding to let the creature go down fighting with some respect. Reina watches from above as Kanado grips his dagger, standing his ground while her monster of a dad lunges through the air to strike. He swears this fight won't end like the last one, right as the beast lets out a huge roar and charges in. The monster swings its giant arm, but Kanado is way too fast, ducking under the blow and slicing right through its bicep. He sticks the landing while the monster backs away, screaming in rage and grabbing its sliced-off arm. The monster swings its other arm, but Kanata easily dodges the sloppy hit while its chopped-off hand flies through the air behind him. The chopped-off limb hits the ground right next to Reina with a gross thud, and while she gasps in shock, Kanados's eyes go wide as he watches the monster stare at its own smoking stomach. Nasty black tentacles explode from the stump, weaving together to grow the monster's whole arm back in the grossest way possible. He's totally stunned because even though his wonder rot should have worked, the monster is healing way too fast, and he realizes the only way to end this is by taking its head off. Right before you can even try your new plan, the monster's brand new arm starts shaking and blowing up with some seriously gross muscles. That mutated arm turns into a giant heavy club and slams into the rocky ground with insane power. The monster's attack completely shatters a massive stone pillar, sending rocks flying everywhere while Reina watches from a distance, totally confused about what Kanado is actually planning. Instead of just charging, it grabs a massive chunk of the broken pillar and gets ready to use it as a weapon. He dives out of the way just as the monster chucks a huge rock that slams right into the spot where he was standing. The monster doesn't even care that it missed, letting out a huge roar as it gets ready to fire again. He figures out the monster is using long-range attacks to stay away from his blade, but he's not worried as long as he keeps dodging. His confidence totally vanishes when he suddenly realizes how bad things really are, and he grinds his teeth in pure frustration. He turns away from the beast and shouts for Sisle's help, but Reina points out that if she kills it, he won't get the credit, so he quickly promises he'll be the one to land the final blow. He's not asking for help with the fight. He just points at someone far away and tells Sisle to go grab them. There's Ratone, lying completely still and totally helpless on a sharp chunk of broken rubble. He explains he can't go all out while she's in the way because she might get caught in the crossfire, so Sisle agrees to help, and Reina surprisingly jumps in. Sisle kicks her plan into gear and vanishes in a total blur, leaving Ratone completely stunned and wondering where she went. Reina's father is a total monster now, and he's looking around completely lost as Sisle blurs across the battlefield, carrying Reina straight toward that defenseless re-tomb. She teleports right next to the monster in a flash, and Reina just floats there, winking at her beast mode dad while teasing him for actually being fast enough to see her move. That totally sets the monster off, and it lets out a massive roar of pure frustration. It smashes its giant fist into the ground, sending a shockwave through the dirt that barely misses Reina as she screams in terror. Kanata watches the distraction work from a safe distance and cracks a smile, giving Sisle props for pulling it off perfect. Sisle gets the monster's attention, chucks Reina over her shoulder, and starts running, leaving the totally confused Ratone in the dust. While lugging her around, Sisle casually jokes that the vampire princess is way heavier than she looks and should probably start a diet. With his friends finally safe, Kanado locks onto the monster and shouts that he can finally go all out to end this, while Ratone stands there totally stunned because she couldn't even ooh. The monster hunches over in total rage, and its power is so insane that the ground literally starts cracking into pieces. Ken Otto faces off against a massive monster and calls for Lala, summoning a giant skeleton beast with ram horns to burn everything to the ground with its dragon breath. The skeleton monster listened and fired a massive energy blast that swallowed the whole area in a blinding flash. The explosion kicked up a massive cloud of smoke that covered everything, and Sisle was super annoyed because she couldn't see a single thing. Out of nowhere, a crazy roar rips through the smoke as the monster vampire lunges forward, and he's not even hurt. The monster didn't stop for a second, snarling with its sharp fangs as it burst right through the fading smoke. Just as it lunged, a small dark object zoomed through the air and smacked it right in the head, stopping it in its tracks. The monster stumbled back from the surprise hit, its head jerking to the side as it glared at the object that was now starting to smoke. It turns out that thing flying through the air was actually Kanado's tiny, shaking slime bug. The distraction worked perfectly, and Kanado suddenly appeared right behind the monster with a stone-cold look. The beast's eyes went wide as it realized it was cooked, and Kanado just stared it down for one final goodbye. The beast roared like crazy as Kanado dove down for the finishing blow, leaving Sisle and Reina totally stunned as they watched from the sidelines. He slams his blade through the monster's neck, cutting its head clean off and sending both pieces flying through the air. His sword slices straight through bone, and blood sprays everywhere as he lands the killing blow. The giant beast slams into the dirt stone-cold dead, and he sticks a perfect landing before walking away without even looking back. Kanado looks over at Reina sitting on a rock, crying her eyes out as she says one last goodbye to her dad, and he asks her if she's doing okay. She looks up through her tears with a mix of total sadness and pure determination, forcing a tiny smile to tell him she's okay, even though it hurts like crazy. She explains that watching her dad live on as a mindless monster would have been way more painful for her. Now that the truth is out, a wooden chest pops up to show the boss is finished, and when Reina calls him Argusama to say thanks, he just tells her it's no big deal. He kneels down right next to the chest, realizing it's a rare boss drop and wondering what kind of awesome loot is waiting inside. He's checking out the chest when Sisle's gasp makes him look over, and instead of a monster's head, he finds a woman's severed head staring back with wide. The head looks super creepy with its pale skin and frozen face, but then its eyes suddenly glow as weird energy starts sparking all over. Kanado was staring right at that severed head when Sisle suddenly broke the silence, pointing in total shock and screaming that it was still right there. He barely had time to react before that severed head started swelling up like crazy, bubbling and growing way too fast. The thing was blowing up fast, so Sisle grabbed the knocked-out Reina, threw her over her shoulder, and screamed at Kanado to run as she bolted away from the danger. He ignored her begging, his face turning dead serious as he stepped up to that weird pulsing thing. Suddenly, a massive explosion ripped the whole room apart, blowing up right from where the head used to be. The explosion sent dust and junk flying everywhere, and from the edge of the smoke, a shaken-up Reina and Sisle watched in total horror as he screamed his name into the chaos. The massive fight is finally over, but a giant cloud of smoke and dust from the blast is totally hiding everything from sight. Reina watches the total destruction from a distance, her eyes wide with fear as she whispers Kanado's name, while Sisle just stands there looking way too calm about it all. Sisle is stunned by the massive explosion, realizing Reina's dad just dumped all his power at once, and she's totally confused why Kanado didn't just run for it since She frowns a bit and keeps talking, but first, she warns everyone that this is just a theory. Right in the middle of the blast zone, Kanado huddles under Luli the slime, and realizes Reina's dad hit him with a nasty evil god power called mental contamination. Sisle wonders out loud if his movement was somehow sealed, but Reina stares into the smoke and totally refuses to believe it. She snaps her head towards Sisle, looking totally panicked as she asks if he's actually right about this. Suddenly, Kanado walks right out of the smoke without a single scratch, and while Reina screams his name in total relief, he just coolly tells her that wasn't actually an attack, though it was pretty close. He flashes a smug grin and reveals that Lala the dragon actually shielded him the exact second the explosion hit. He pulls out this fancy little chest, calling it a boss drop and a gift from her dad. And when she asks if he opened it, he admits he did, and that her father's feelings are totally messing with his head. He remembers standing over the vampire's head after the fight, hearing it desperately beg for its life. He says that cry for help kept ringing in his head, hitting him with a massive wave of feelings and broken memories. Sisle asks if the big request was just to keep Reina safe, and while Reina cries out for her dad, Kanato admits that was only one part of the deal. His stomach drops as he remembers there's still one last favor he has to handle. Back at the guild, Kanato announces he's finally brought Raton back, dropping her frozen stone body onto the table for everyone to see. Nemera screams out Raton's name, totally freaked out by how bad she looks. All the other adventurers start whispering to each other, wondering if a Medusa or a Hydra finally took. He turns back to Nemera's crew and drops a truth bomb. That impossible dungeon they couldn't handle was a total breeze for him to clear solo without a single scratch, and now he's staring them down, asking what their next move is. After a second of total silence, Nemera snaps back and demands to know how Kanato is actually going to save Raton. He stares at Raton's frozen body and demands answers, totally sure that Kanato must have scored a rare curse-breaking item from a boss drop, because there's just no other way. Nemera and the hooded guy are totally fuming as they corner Kanato, demanding to know how he'll fix her and if he even beat the dungeon. But Kanato just stares at the. He shuts them down, asking why they're whining instead of being grateful, and calls them out for being totally selfish about whose fault this mess really is. While Nemera screams his name, Kanato feels like a total idiot for mocking him earlier, especially since Nemera just crushed an enemy they couldn't even touch, and now he's ready to make them suffer and ditch them as fast as possible. He flips the blame right back on them, asking why he has to find a cure when they're the ones who ditched Raton, leaving every adventurer there totally speechless. The whole guild hall goes wild as the news spreads, with people shouting that they ditched their teammate, and once everyone remembers the rumors about the tamer they abandoned, the entire crowd turns on. The shouting turns into a brawl as the adventurers start chucking mugs and bottles at Nemera, calling his whole squad a total disgrace. Hood gets slammed too, screaming in pain and begging them to stop while the attacks just keep coming. This adventurer shoves Nimmer and screams at him to get his trashy self away. Nemera's face is getting crushed into the floor, and that's when it hits him. Kanato knew this would happen all along and totally set them up at the guild just to expose them. He's totally panicking and begs the guildmaster, Ansa, for help because no one else gets it. But Ansa just looks down with a serious face and admits the rumors are actually true. The guildmaster gives him a death stare and asks if he actually ditched his teammate. But even though Nemeris tries to make excuses, the crowd just drowns him out until Ansa shuts him down, saying no real adventurer would do that, and it's super sus that only Raton got turned to stone while the rest of them are totally fine. He kept laying down the law, telling Nemera and her friend that they both needed to think about what they did and face the consequences. The punishment was brutal as they both got kicked down to E rank, leaving Nemera and the hooded woman looking like they'd been punched in the face from total shock. He yelled out in total shock, sweating like crazy as he realized 5 years of grinding for S rank was wiped out in a single second. While Nemera was still reeling from the judgment, Kanato just turned and walked away in silence, but the guildmaster yelled after him to fix his friend's stone body and said the guy totally deserved it. He walks out of the guild hall to find Sisle waiting, and she heads right over to ask if he's finally done inside. Kanato meets back up with his squad and tells Reina that the dress her dad got her looks amazing, but she just says thanks and immediately asks how his revenge against his old team is going. He just smirked and brushed it off, saying that even though they suffered, he didn't care about them anymore. Reina agreed, saying that having awesome friends is the ultimate payback, and when she asked what his next move was, Kanato looked her right in the eye and told her he'd already made up his mind. He dropped the bombshell that he wanted even more revenge, and while Reina was totally shocked because she thought it was over, Kanato made it clear this hit was actually for her dad. He stared her right in the eyes and told her that before it was all over, her dad actually asked him for one last favor. He starts breaking down the mission, explaining how Reina's dad once showed him photos of creepy cloaked figures hanging around a total wreck of a building. He explains those are actually memory bits her dad picked up when a fake priest injected him with some creepy ghost power. Standing on a stone bridge with the squad, Sisle lets the news sink in and asks if he's going to use that feeling to track them down and get his revenge. He looks at Reina and asks if she wants payback too, and she doesn't even blink before saying she's all in with total fire in her eyes. She's totally fired up at first, but then she starts to wonder if it's actually okay to drag Kanato and the rest of the crew into her messy family drama. Rebecca sees her hesitating and tells her they're all a team now, so Sisle totally agrees and says she's been wanting to hunt those guys down anyway. Rebecca explains that since she's the one feeding a dark god, she feels like it's her job to take out anyone else messing with evil powers. Seeing his squad finally ready to roll, Kanato flashes a confident smirk, and tells everyone it's time to head out. He tells the squad their first mission is to find that old building from the vision, and they start trekking through a field of massive crumbling ruins. Right there in the same ruins, three mysterious figures in cloaks are standing together with their faces totally hidden in the shadows of their hoods. Inside the ruins, one of the cloaked guys just shrugged and said, if humanity's strongest fighter beat their target, then it was bound to happen anyway. Another guy just clicked his tongue and shut them down, saying the vampire noble definitely got wrecked. But it was by someone with a second job. He explains that a tamer named Arga was the one who took the noble's head. And a hooded guy adds that the vampire princess has joined their squad too, which means things are about to... The little guy wasn't backing down at all, just smirking as they told everyone they had a plan. The leader turned to the whole group, raised his hand, and told them that to make their dream come true, they shouldn't be scared of anyone, no matter who they are. Kanado finally got his revenge and walked with Reina and Sisle, deciding right then that they'd just crush anyone who dared to stand in their way. Inside a super bright facility, an old hooded priest gets a tour, tells the staff everything looks great, and then heads down the stairs into a massive, creepy basement. He walks into this massive, buzzing lab filled with giant bubbling tanks and a crazy mess of pipes, while scientists rush around working on some seriously creepy experiments. And then he looks up. The priest walks over to a scientist and tells them to keep up the hard work, but then he stops to stare at a pod where Reina's dad is floating like a mutated freak, and he actually, one line out. Preserve the sequence exactly. Since the input was provided as a single block, one paragraph, I will output one single line. Final polish. Right after the breach, a massive explosion rips through the entrance, shredding the machines and sending the scientists flying through a storm of broken glass and twisted metal. In all the chaos, a fast, dark shadow rips through the surviving scientists and drops them right where they stand. The hooded priest is shaking in his boots because he realizes this girl is actually the vampire noble's daughter. And now he's panicking that Arga the Tamer might be here too, grumbling about how that kid has become way too famous. Kanato Ari Lion walks right through the wreckage with Reina and smirks, saying he must be a big deal if some random old guy he's never met knows exactly who he is. The priest groans in total frustration, demanding to know how they found his hideout, but Kanata just stays cool and says a nice vampire noble gave him a tip. His face goes dead serious as he glares with total focus, telling them straight up that he's here to get payback. He screams about getting revenge, but the head priest doesn't even flinch, just giving him a cold look and asking what their real goal is. He suddenly spins around and screams down to his crew, telling the scientist to let the magic beasts loose to tear the intruders apart. As soon as the order is given, the massive gate slams open, letting out two nasty, scaly monsters with giant mouths and squirming tentacles. The beast charges straight for Kananato while the priest watches from above, realizing he's totally outmatched and deciding to ditch him, just as one of the monsters lifts its massive foot to stomp Kanado. Their attack stops dead as a blur flashes by, slicing both their heads off before they can even land a hit. The priest trips backward in total shock, his eyes popping out as he tries to track the blur that just absolutely wrecked his monsters. He spots Reina standing in the middle of the wreckage, and her power is way higher than he ever imagined. He wonders out loud if this vampire princess is actually this scary or if she's using... Kanata explains that this is Reina's true power, which finally woke up because she's so furious about her dad being driven totally insane. The priest is shaking and sweating with rage, clutching his staff and swearing he's going to make these kids pay. Kanado just steps up totally calm, demanding to know what the old man did to his dad, but the priest just fumes and calls him a disrespectful brat. He barely finishes his threat before Reina lunges forward, her arm moving so fast she sends his head flying right off his shoulders. She's standing over the priest's headless body as Kanado rushes in, begging her not to kill their only source of info, but Reina just coolly says the guy was acting sketchy. She stares them down and makes it clear she wasn't the one who actually killed him. Right then, the priest's severed head starts gasping and yelling in total shock, and Reina just smiles, explaining she used blood magic to keep him alive so they can have a little chat before his time runs out. Kanado asks the priest if they're really trying to bring back the evil god he already crushed, calling it a total joke, but the priest's head snaps back in a rage, screaming that it's definitely not just a dream. He screams that bringing back the evil god isn't just a dream anymore, it's actually happening, and it's exactly what his group has been working for. He keeps going, explaining how they grabbed the last drops of the evil god's blood and shoved it into different creatures to see what would happen when the god finally returns. Reina is absolutely fuming, realizing with total horror that her dad wasn't just some random sacrifice for this sick experiment, He was a noble one. The priest flashes a wicked grin and confirms her worst nightmare, telling her that every test subject is just food for their master. He breaks down the plan to sacrifice the test subjects' power and bodies to their god. Then he glares at Reina, calling her the sinful daughter who killed their creator and asking if she realizes what this means for her. Laughing like a total psycho, he screams that their god is coming back way stronger than when she first beat him. But Reina doesn't even flinch, just saying her dad. She stares at the priest's severed head with pure hatred, calling him a total scumbag for raising her father just to be a sacrifice for Lord Evil Guy. While she's fuming, Kanado stays totally chill and tells Sisle and Reina that even though the old man won't shut up, his yapping is actually super useful. The priest just gives a cold laugh in his head, mocking them because knowing the plan is useless since they can't stop the god's rebirth, and he's dead certain that none of them are making it out of there alive. Right on cue, the ground behind them starts bubbling like crazy until a massive, gross pile of black slime and guts bursts out, towering over everyone. This nasty creature starts growing as it sucks up every dead body on the floor, and Sisle panics because it's using a desperate spell to fuse all that flesh into one giant monster. The priest's head laughs like a total psycho, bragging that he set off the spell right before getting chopped so everyone can turn into a giant pile of meat to feed his evil god. Right after he shouts, that massive gross monster lunges at the group like a wave of darkness, and the priest screams that they're all going to be part of it too. Kanado just smirks because he knows this monster is way too slow, and with one massive kick, he sends the clergyman's head flying. He whips around and fires a massive energy blast from his palm, hitting the flesh monster dead on and blowing it to absolute pieces. Now that the fight's over, he starts putting the pieces of the guy's plan together. He realizes all that yapping was just a distraction to let that monster blob keep growing. Since there, Kanado ignores the melting priest's final curse and tells his dragon Lala to just burn the whole place and everyone in it to the ground. The priest's words are cut off by one last scream as a massive wave of fire completely swallows him up. The fire goes off in a massive blast, smashing the ground and sending rocks flying everywhere. As the smoke finally clears, the entire building is totally gone, leaving nothing behind but a massive smoking crater. Reina looks at the wreckage and grumbles that she wanted to finish off that priest herself. So Sisle says sorry for ending it so quickly while reminding her they still have more people to hunt down, and she honestly can't understand why anyone would want to bring back the evil god after they worked so hard to take him down before. Kanado looks totally annoyed the second they bring it up, and Rain sighs right next to him, agreeing that this whole situation is a total drag. He grips his fist tight, totally locked in, and shouts that since this evil god showed up, he's the one who's going to finish it. Deep down, he knows that winning this fight is his ticket to finally reaching Sisle, and Reina looks at him in total shock, asking if he's actually for real right now. Standing on the cliff with his crew, Kanado looks back at his crazy journey, realizing he went from a total nobody to someone strong enough to challenge a god. He's grinding those herbs in a bowl to make a quick healing paste. With the medicine finally ready, she smears it onto his arm, and even though he's whining about the sting, she tells him they need to heal up fast since they're stuck sleeping outside again tonight. Her partner Norshir is seriously struggling, groaning because the rocky ground is pure torture on his injuries, and he's wishing they had a healer or at least enough gold for a decent place to crash. His partner looks totally stressed, pointing out they're dead broke and can't even afford a room. Plus, they can't take any guild jobs since their only healer is still turned to stone. Just thinking about money gives Norshi a nasty flashback of getting tossed out by two thugs, and he knows they'll just get wrecked even harder if they try again. As the memory fades, his friend asks if he's okay, but Norshi totally snaps, screaming that Arga ruined their lives and that the people hunting them are the real bad guys, while he's cut off mid-shout when a tiny snake monster with a dragon head lunges out and wraps around his arm, totally freaking him and his friend out. The monster wraps around his wrist and squeezes down hard, refusing to let go. Before he can even move, a new voice suddenly breaks the silence as a girl named Sisle steps out from the grass and walks right up to them. Seeing they're both covered in nasty wounds, she doesn't even tell him her name. She just gives him this super creepy dark smile. Kanado and Reina are just chilling at a small table outside in this quiet town, finally getting a second to relax with some drinks. Lasers rain down and she's totally loving it, closing her eyes with a massive happy grin. Kanado notices her huge smile and asks why she's so hyped, and she shouts that of course she's happy since she's on a date with Lord Arga. He asks when this even became a date, but a blushing Reina insists that being alone together counts, only for him to kill the mood by saying it's just a break before they fight the evil. Hearing about their enemy snaps her back to reality, and as she stares into her drink, she admits she doesn't really know what an evil god even is. He's just as confused as she is, admitting he doesn't know a thing about them either. He explains that these evil gods actually come from space, and depending on how strong they get, they can literally wipe out entire planets. He knows if this monster is actually waking up, they have no choice but to take it down, and he gives a quiet apology. Reina's face goes dark as she realizes her simple mission to avenge her dad has spiraled into a massive war she never expected. Kanata tells her she's got nothing to be sorry for since her warning about the evil god coming back fits his plans perfectly, and then he asks if she even knows how few people have ever actually taken one down. He says that in this entire world only 2 people have ever actually managed to take down an evil god: Sisle and someone named Lukumi Milk Tea. Reina realizes Lukumi is a tamer just like her, and she's actually the legendary first SSS rank that every single tamer looks up to. Kanato flashes a cocky grin, saying that if he takes down an evil god, he'll finally be as strong as those 2 legends and one step closer to being the absolute best. She looks up at him with a soft smile, thanking him for the big chance, but then her mind drifts back to the legendary tamer as she wonders what kind of person Lukumi actually is. He leans back and admits he's never seen her, noting that even Sisle hasn't met the legendary tamer, while Reina calls Lukumi a total mystery, and Kanato mentions rumors of. He gives them some hope, saying that if they keep getting stronger, they'll eventually run into her just like they did with Sisle. They stop talking as Rana realizes Sisle isn't back yet, but she figures he's probably just taking his time. High on a hill above the town, a mysterious hooded guy is lurking in the trees, totally mocking the idea of just sitting around and waiting for souvenirs. He gulps down a tiny vial with a nasty smirk, watching them act totally clueless while their strongest fighter is out shopping and the others are just sipping tea, making this the perfect moment for him to strike and win. His eyes narrow as he locks in, realizing they're totally running out of time to bring back his master, the evil god. He knew these guys had no clue where his master was hiding yet, but since they'd find him eventually, he decided to move the evil god while they were sleeping, so they couldn't stop the revival. He lifted the vial high and promised that as soon as the revival was done, the win was totally theirs. He froze right where he stood as Kanado stared him down from across the clearing, making him panic that his cover was totally blown. Kanado's focus totally shifted when he felt a familiar energy nearby, and he knew right then that Sisle was finally back. The hooded guy whipped around in total shock, and he couldn't believe his eyes because Sisle Lu Sergil was standing right there behind him. He stood there totally stunned, stuttering to ask why she showed up, while Sisle just flashed a big grin and gave him a super friendly hello. She says it's super easy to sniff out those cult members because they all smell like evil god blood. Then she asks her little pet Lulu if she can tell too since they're from the same bloodline, and the hooded guy starts sweating like crazy as he realizes he's totally busted. He looked right past her at the horizon where huge clouds of smoke were pouring into the sky, and he just yelled, "No way!" in total shock. Sisle confirmed his worst nightmare. Every single one of his research labs was totally trashed. She explained they used their power to sniff out evil gods to find his secret bases, hitting them so fast he didn't even realize they were gone. Her face went totally cold, as she told them she's usually pretty chill, but right now she's absolutely fuming, and won't let them bring that evil god back to life. The hooded guy gives Sisle a death stare, totally annoyed she didn't even see him coming, and says Reina should be the one to decide her fate. Before he can even move, a tiny black orb streaks past him and triggers a massive explosion that sends him flying, while Sisle just stands there watching the whole thing go down. Shaken by that surprise hit, he clenches his fist in anger and realizes he's got to get out of there fast to come up with a better plan. Just as he's about to bolt, he sees Sisle blocking his path, and his jaw drops in total disbelief. He barely has time to be shocked before he's slammed down into a pool of blood, while Sisle stands over him without a single scratch. Once the danger is gone, she turns to greet Kanado and Rebecca, who just arrived, casually says she's back, and tells the guy on the ground he was totally dreaming if he. She flashes a huge peace sign and drops the biggest news yet. She finally found where the evil god is hiding. Right nearby, Norsher and the ponytail adventurer are celebrating their big recovery, totally hyped that they're all healed up and thanking their mystery saviors. But their friend in the cloak isn't celebrating at all, and she looks totally stressed as she mutters that the more she hears, the worse this whole mess sounds. Northshire completely loses his cool and demands to know if Arga is the one behind this, calling it straight-up evil to treat his old friends this way, while the girl with the ponytail screams that he better understand exactly why they're so ticked off. Things get super tense as the mysterious cloaked lady finally steps out of the shadows. She looks Norshi's crew dead in the eye and drops a total bombshell. She tells them that she reveals she's also a tamer, and because of that, she can't just let a guy like Arga get away with it. Norshi is totally thrown off by the He demands to know who she is, so she reaches out and promises to make him way stronger with fusion, showing him that she can use those powers too. She flashed a confident smirk and finally dropped her hood to show her face, holding a tiny three-eyed creature and introducing herself as Lukumi Milk Tea. The gang pulls up to a massive stone tower called the First Labyrinth, and Reina confirms this is exactly where the evil god is hiding. She's 100% sure because she's heard the exact same story from a bunch of different cult members. She breaks down the whole plan. By stashing their target in a crazy SSS rank dungeon that almost nobody survives, it's basically impossible for anyone to find it. With the plan set, as they keep moving, Reina apologizes in case her info is wrong, but Kanata tells her it's all good, totally unaware that a beast with glowing eyes and sharp fangs is stalking them from the shadows. This saber-toothed monster jumps out of the dark, roaring and swinging its giant claws right at Kanado. The monster is taken out in a flash, lying dead on the stone floor with its head totally crushed, while Kanado just shrugs and says even if the tip was a lie, there's still... The group keeps pushing forward until they hit a fork with two identical arches, and Reina immediately says they should split up to cover more ground. She waves as she heads down a hallway, telling them that if she hits a dead end, she'll just turn back and follow them, and Kanado says they'll do the exact same thing. Reina asks if Sisle will be okay alone, but Kanado knows she's got this and just warns her to watch for traps as she heads out with her familiars, already suspecting the cult is up to something shady. Just as they're about to split up, Reina stops dead in her tracks with a look of total shock, and when Kanado asks what's wrong, she can barely even speak because she just realized something absolutely terrifying. Reina's mind was totally somewhere else, and as she blushed realizing they were finally alone, she started thinking this was basically a date and wondered if Sisle had set them up on purpose. She was totally lost in her love fantasy until Kanado snapped at her to hide in the shadows, making her apologize and promise to stay quiet as she scrambled back. Over on the other path, Sisle hits a dead end, but just as she says it out loud, she senses something and stares straight into the shadows. Scary growls echoed from the shadows as these monsters ripped their huge, toothy mouths wide open. Her face went cold as she recognized that smell. It was the blood of an evil god, and she knew right then these weren't just normal monsters. Two freaky monsters step out of the dark, looking super buff on top but with gross pale tentacles for hair and legs. One of the monsters wearing glasses actually starts talking, guessing she survived because of the evil god's blood and asking if she's part of the cult's research team, which totally catches Sis. She snapped back, asking if they were the real villains for trying to trash the world, and the monster roared in total rage because she just wiped out its squad with... The monster let out one last scream for her to die and lunged, but Sisle grabbed her sword with a look that said she was totally ready to end this. Its liquid body burst forward, firing a ton of sharp tentacles straight at her. She springs into the air with her blade ready just as those two tentacle monsters dive at her from both sides. Her sword lands a direct hit, making the monster's weird liquid body warp and twist like crazy. As the monster melts away, one head pops back up gurgling a curse, and Sisle watches in shock as a glowing mark lights up the floor and traps the beast. The sigil explodes in a massive cloud of smoke, and when it clears, the monsters are totally wiped out, their bodies just melting into nothing. She stands there all alone in the middle of the mess, staring at the empty spot where those guys used to be as the smoke finally clears out. She looks totally lost and creeped out, wondering what the heck just happened. Somewhere else in the maze, Kanado tells Reina they need to watch their steps since the evil god's room is definitely close. But as they move forward, a voice suddenly calls out his secret name. His eyes go wide as it all finally clicks for him. He turns around to see Nymera giving him a chill wave, and Reina realizes this is the same guy who kicked out Lord Arga. Kanado demands to know what he's doing there, but Nymera just says he's been waiting for him and that Kanado should already know exactly why they're meeting. Nymera looks super chill and almost happy as he tells Kanado he's going to end him just because he hates his guts. Reina jumps right in front of Kanado and tells him to stay back, calling the new guy an enemy and declaring she's going to handle the whole fight herself. Nymera watches the scene and wonders how an E rank like Kanado even got into an SSS rank lab, especially since Sans is missing and Kanado is acting way too chill. Kanado holds Reina back to see what the enemy does first, and even though she thinks the guy looks like a total weakling, Kanado shuts her down and yells that there's absolutely no way. He finally snaps and shouts at Reina, telling her he's done with people ruining their time alone. Reina sees her opening and flies forward in a flash, but Nemera catches her fist like it's nothing, and the power of the hit forces them both into a low crouch. She looks down at her caught hand, totally shocked for a second, but then she just smirks and laughs that he's every bit as weak as she expected. Nimra just shrugs off the trash talk and tosses her through the air like it's nothing, making Kanado scream her name in a panic, while Nimra lets out a super creepy laugh. He stands there with his arms wide open as two gross discolored limbs burst out of his back and pin him down. He mocks Arga, asking why he's keeping a monster that won. Finally, we see where those extra arms are coming from. A girl with pigtails named Raton is clinging to Nemera's back. She wraps her arms around him with a nasty grin, telling him this is just as pathetic as the one he tamed before. Nemera laughs at the wrecked look on Argus's face, and while Kanado is totally distracted thinking about Sans, Raton steps up to take this monster down herself, making Nemera. She screamed at the vampire on the ground, telling the monster it better start listening to its master. Before she can even finish, a dark figure streaks across the ground and Kanados lands a massive kick, blasting Nemeris and that parasite Raton far away from Rena. He rushed over to the vampire princess and begged her to wake up, and as the dust settled, Rena finally moved and let out a tiny laugh. Suddenly, a loud laugh from behind cuts him off as Nemera stands there, totally fine, clutching his chest and bragging that the attack didn't even hurt, while Raton sits on his back and shouts that they've both leveled up big time. Kanado was sweating bullets and asked if the evil god cult had messed with them, but Nemera and Ratone just looked confused and explained that a super nice tamer was actually the one who... He flashed a wicked smirk and started talking about a legendary tamer who was way stronger than Kanado, and when he dropped the name Lakumi Milk Tea, Kanado was left completely speechless. The receptionist bursts into the guild hall with her fist pumped, yelling to everyone that she just saw the legendary Lakumi. The adventurers immediately start doubting her, with one guy asking if she's for real and another saying Lakumi hasn't been seen in forever, but a third guy reminds everyone that Lakumi is. She's totally sure because of a secret connection, explaining that back when she was a delinquent, she actually lost a fight to Lakumi, so there's no way she's wrong about this. The adventurers are totally shocked and start gossiping about her past, and while Ansa is still confused, Nemera's eyes go wide as she whispers Lukumi's name, leaving the panicked receptionist begging him to just ignore her wild history. Suddenly, everything Kanado and his crew said earlier finally clicks, and he realizes they weren't kidding when they told him Lukumi is on their side. He and Ratone lock eyes with total focus as Nemera shouts that their new squad will give them the power to finally crush Arga, while Ratone just gives a creepy grin and says Arga is next on their list. Back at the guild, everyone's gossiping about why a solo pro like Lakumi would ever team up with total weaklings. The receptionist is starting to doubt if she actually saw her alone, and when someone asks Nemera how she's making them stronger, he just snaps that he has no clue. Over in a rocky wasteland, Kanado and Nemeris are staring each other down, while Reyna the vampire is totally passed out nearby, and way in the distance, a massive tower rises up from a round fortress. The memory is still fresh. Lukumi smirks and drops a total bombshell on a shocked Nemera by revealing she confused too, while Kanado just stands there, sweating and stuttering her name in disbelief. They were right to be scared because Nemera and Ratone now have creepy marks all over their faces and are grinning like total psychos, shouting that they've been reborn and are way stronger now that they... The fused warrior mocks Kanado, loving the look of pure shock on his face. Then he charges in with a crazy grin and screams that he wants to see more of that terrified expression. The duo jumps him with a crazy team attack, forcing Kanado to block Nomura's fist and dodge Ratone's wild swing while she laughs like a psycho, and their non-stop hits. Kanado gets pushed back by the pressure and lets out a massive shout as he struggles. He quickly spins around and kicks a rock off the ground, sending it flying like a bullet straight at N. The fused creature stumbles back and grabs his face after that massive hit, while Kanado watches from a distance, looking totally on edge as he checks out the damage he just dealt. The warrior just laughs and pulls his hand back to show a gross smoking mess where his eye used to be, asking Kanato with a creepy grin if he actually thought he landed that hit. His eye socket bubbles and heals up instantly, and he just smirks, bragging that Lakomi gave him the power to recover from any injury. With his eye totally healed, he throws his arms wide and brags that after fusing with all those monsters, their new bodies are way too strong for Kanado to ever beat. He gets right in Kanado's face and asks how it feels to go up against them, wondering if he's shaking with fear or losing hope, but Kanado stays totally chill and he stays totally chill while saying no. which completely catches the fused warrior off guard. And as Kanado's eyes sharpen, he reveals that he actually fears how hopeless and stupid they are, asking, he yells out his discovery with total confidence, realizing the evil god cult gave them their powers and manipulated them for some reason he hasn't figured out yet. He kept spilling the cult's secrets, explaining they had to pose as a legendary warrior just to trick everyone, because if they'd shown their true evil faces, even Nemera and Raton would have ended up in the same mess he was in. He warned them that the thing they merged with was probably some kind of wicked god monster. Its whole power was corrupted by that evil god's blood. Now, they were slowly going to... The scary truth finally hits Nemera, and he lets out a massive scream as his body starts mutating and his arms stretch into weird, twisted shapes. Kanado watched the transformation with a cold stare, thinking about how they always blamed others and acted superior, and he knew this gross ending was exactly what these losers deserved. Right as he predicted, the two fused into one massive, creepy monster. He called them out, saying it wasn't just their hearts that were ugly anymore. Their new bodies finally showed everyone how rotten. The Nimmer's head roared in pure rage after that insult, but Kanado didn't even flinch, basically telling them that even if they leveled up, trash is still trash. The beast lunges forward in a total rage, but Kanado stays ready, knowing he has to finish them off in this monster form, and he dodges just in time as the attack smashes into the dirt. He dashed forward in a split second and slammed a fist glowing with dark power right into its gut, sending a massive shockwave through its gross body that made both heads scream in total pain. That hit was way too much for their shaky fusion, and as the monster started ripping apart, the Retone head let out one last desperate scream for its god. He finished the fight with one last epic swing, blowing the monster to bits as Ratone's sliced-up body slammed into the dirt. He watched his totally wrecked enemy refuse to quit as the Nimmer part of the monster snarled, screaming that it wasn't dying and would just heal itself right back up. He just shrugs off the bragging and calls out a new familiar named Lulu, a tiny orb-shaped Shoggoth that immediately uses its crushed hope skill to slam into the fused monster like a total cannonball. The hit slams right into the monster's chest, and Nemera just laughs it off like it's a tiny scratch, but his smug face turns to pure horror the second he realizes he isn't. He calmly reveals that Lulu is an evil god-type monster whose attacks completely shut down healing, a secret he learned when Reina's dad couldn't recover from her mental strikes, leaving the fused beast screaming in agony as its wound just won't close. It was a total disaster as the monster started falling apart into dark energy, and Nemmer could only stutter in pure terror as he realized his own body was literally crumbling away. With one last silent blast, the monster completely turns to dust, sending her upper body flying through the air as she screams his name in total desperation. She flew straight at him, totally fueled by rage, and twisted midair with a look of pure hate as she screamed that she was going to kill him. Just as she was about to reach her target, a loud voice suddenly yelled, "Hey!" Out of nowhere, Reynal Aririlcia teleports right between them, summoning a wall of ghost swords that stops Ratone's attack just inches away and leaves the monster totally speechless. The vampire princess flashed a scary grin at the helpless Ratone, reminding him of how he messed up earlier, and the poor guy looked absolutely terrified. She doesn't waste a second, summoning a storm of blades that rip right through Ratone's tiny body. Since he's still stuck to her, Nomura screams out in pure... After taking that deadly hit, Nimura starts melting into a gross, bubbling puddle, cursing everyone out and screaming for Argo as his voice finally fades away. Just as the fuse monster melts away, Sisle sprints in yelling for Arga, and a totally shook Kanado turns his head to see her. The pool where the monster was bubbles like crazy for a second, then goes totally silent like it was never even there. Sisle stops right next to Kanado and Reina, looking at the wreckage and realizing this is a total repeat of what happened before. Kanado admits he's totally lost and asks what's going on, while Sisle stares at a figure on a pile of rubble and says it's all for the evil god. Kanado locks eyes with the figure and realizes it's the fake Lakomi, demanding to know why she played him and the rest of the group like puppets. She just gives a chill. She gives a wicked smirk, explaining that all this hate just makes her evil god stronger, and those adventurers are nothing but snacks to power him up. Sisle finally realizes the messed up plan. This woman forced the people who hated Kanado to fight the cultists who wanted Sisle dead. The fake Sisle admits it's true. With her secret finally out, she throws her arms wide as the ground shatters under her feet, shouting that it's time to bring back the evil god who's now more powerful than ever. She flashes a totally insane smile and tells Kanado to enjoy the nightmare, while he just stares her down with a look of pure determination.